In September 2024, an interstate highway fell into a river. Not a bridge, not an overpass. The road itself, whole stretches of Interstate 40's eastbound lanes, carved away by the Pigeon River until the asphalt hung over the water like a broken shelf, guardrails swinging in the air over the current. And here's the part that matters. Nobody who knew this road was surprised, because the mountains have been taking pieces of Interstate 40 for as long as Interstate 40 has existed. Rockslides buried it in 1985, again in 1997. In 2009, a wall of rock let go above the roadway and shut the interstate down for 6 months. The men who blasted this highway through the edge of the Smokies were warned 6 decades ago that the mountain would never really accept it. They built it anyway. This is the story of America's most stubborn interstate, why it keeps getting destroyed, why it keeps getting rebuilt, and why the $2 billion reconstruction happening right now is a bet that this time, finally, the road wins. The gorge came first. Between the mountains of western North Carolina and the Tennessee line, the Pigeon River cuts a narrow, violent channel through some of the steepest terrain in the eastern United States. Rock walls on one side, whitewater on the other, almost no flat ground anywhere. In the 1960s, the engineers planning Interstate 40 had to get 4 lanes of traffic through these mountains somehow, and the routes on the table were all bad in different ways. The gorge was the most direct. It was also, by a wide margin, the most dangerous place to put a road. Geologists looked at those slopes, fractured, water-soaked, steep beyond anything the interstate system had tried in the east, and said the obvious thing: this rock does not want to hold still. The road went through the gorge anyway. Construction crews did what 1960s road builders did. They blasted. They cut the mountainside open, bench by bench, and shoved the loose rock downhill toward the river. It was fast and it was cheap, and it left the slopes above the new highway shattered and the slopes below it loaded with debris. When Interstate 40 through the gorge opened in 1968, it was celebrated as an engineering triumph, a road where a road had no business existing. The mountains started collecting almost immediately. Look at the geometry of the gorge and you can see why the road never had room to be safe. There is a cliff face on one shoulder and a river on the other. No margin, nowhere to retreat. When rock comes down from above, it lands on the lanes because there is nowhere else for it to land. When the river rises from below, it chews the roadbed because the roadbed is standing in the river's floodplain and there was never anywhere else to stand. Most highways have problems. This one has a position. And so the failures came on schedule. In 1985, slides closed the gorge. In 1997, the rock came down again and shut the interstate for months. Then in October 2009, a slope above the roadway near the state line collapsed outright, a slab of mountainside the size of a building sitting across all lanes. That closure lasted half a year. Trucks between Asheville and Knoxville were thrown onto detours of well over 100 miles. And while the road sat closed, crews worked over the cut slopes with rock bolts, steel mesh, and catchment ditches, pinning the mountain in place one anchor at a time. It bought time. It did not change the position. But here's what makes this crossing different from every other troubled mountain highway in America. The gorge is only half of the fight. Follow Interstate 40 east, out of the mountains toward Asheville and beyond, and the road has to come down off the Blue Ridge itself, the long descent from the eastern continental divide at Ridgecrest down to the town of Old Fort. Truckers know it as Black Mountain, 7% grade, more than 6 miles. Over 1,000 feet of elevation straight down. For 15 years, drivers have been mounting cameras on their dashboards and filming this descent. The brake check areas at the top, the warning signs stacked one after another, the runaway truck ramps waiting on the shoulder like emergency exits for 80,000-pound vehicles. Watch enough of that footage and you notice the same thing in every video. The drivers narrate it like pilots running a checklist. Gear selection, engine brake, speed on entry. They are not being dramatic. On a 7% grade, A loaded truck that overheats its brakes near the top does not get a second chance near the bottom. So this is what the North Carolina mountain crossing of Interstate 40 actually is. On the west end, a gorge that periodically destroys the road. On the east end, a descent that punishes drivers every single day, in good weather, forever. One interstate, hostile at both ends. And then, in late September 2024, the crossing met something bigger than anything in its history. Hurricane Helene came up from the Gulf and stalled its rainfall over the southern Appalachians. Western North Carolina took catastrophic flooding, with whole valleys underwater, towns cut off, and rivers running at levels with no precedent on record. In the gorge, the Pigeon River did something the Rockslides never had. The slides of 1985 and 1997 and 2009 had attacked the road from above. Helene attacked it from below. The river rose, accelerated through the narrow channel, and began eating the ground out from under the eastbound lanes, undercutting the embankment, pulling the fill out from beneath the pavement, section after section, mile after mile. When the water dropped, the aerial footage showed what was left. Eastbound Interstate 40 wasn't buried. It was gone. The asphalt ended in midair, cantilevered over a river that was now flowing where the road's foundation used to be. The interstate closed indefinitely. It took 5 months of emergency work just to reopen a narrowed, reduced version of the road, and even then officials were blunt that this was survival, not restoration. Then came the real numbers. The North Carolina Department of Transportation put the cost of properly rebuilding its side of the gorge at close to $2 billion, and that figure had already jumped by roughly $900 million as engineers abandoned quick fixes in favor of things that might actually last. Full reconstruction is expected to run for years yet, because this time the plan is different. For half a century, every repair in the gorge put the road back where it was, patched, pinned, and waiting for the next hit. The current rebuild is the first one designed around a different assumption, that the river will rise again and the road has to be built to take it. A roadbed engineered to survive the water instead of merely standing next to it. It is the most ambitious version of a promise this road has been making since 1968. So, will it hold? Here's the honest answer, and it's the same answer the geologists gave 60 years ago. The position hasn't changed. The road still runs on a shelf between fractured rock and moving water, through terrain that sheds stone as a basic function of being terrain. $2 billion buys resistance. It does not buy immunity. The Rockslides took the road in 1985, in 1997, and in 2009. The river took it in 2024. 4 times destroyed, 4 times rebuilt, and each rebuild was bigger, heavier, and more expensive than the last, because each failure taught the engineers exactly where the old defenses ended. That's the real story of I-40 through the Smokies. Not a road that keeps failing, a road locked in a 60-year argument with a mountain range, where every collapse is the mountain's turn to speak, and every rebuild is the engineers refusing to concede. The next slide is already loose somewhere above those lanes. The engineers know it. The truckers, riding their brakes down into Old Fort, know it. And $2 billion says the road stays anyway. Thanks for watching. If you want more of the roads America built against the odds and what they cost to keep, subscribe. There's a lot of mountain left.